The night was so still it felt staged. The kind of suburban silence that only exists when everyone's pretending nothing bad ever happens here. The sprinklers whispered across manicured lawns. A dog barked once far away, then nothing. Just the hum of the river under the footbridge where I stood, phone camera shaking in my hands. Down below, my parents were knee-deep in black water, heaving a wooden box the size of a small coffin. I thought they were dumping trash. But when I saw the way they moved, slow, deliberate, guilty, I started recording. The box hit the current with a dull splash and didn't float. My dad pressed his boot down until it disappeared completely beneath the surface. My mom's voice broke through the quiet, trembling and desperate. No one can ever find it. My dad only said one thing in reply. This ends tonight. The sound of that line didn't match the man I knew. My father never raised his voice, never lost control. He coached Little League, organized block parties, grilled burgers every 4th of July. And my mom, she volunteered at the library, made banana bread for the neighbors, smiled in every photo like the world couldn't touch her. But that night, under the flicker of the bridge light, they looked like strangers. Haunted, hollow-eyed, older than I'd ever seen them. I hid behind the rusted railing, my breath fogging the phone screen, wondering what could possibly be so terrible they'd drown it. When their truck finally rumbled off down the dirt road, I waited a full minute, then climbed down the bank. The mud sucked at my shoes. The river stank of moss and metal. The water came up to my waist, and the cold went straight through my bones. My flashlight caught a glimmer just under the surface. Wood. The box. It was heavier than it had any right to be. My fingers slid over 3 latches sealed with rust and something else. Wax, dark red, streaked like dried blood. My heart thudded. It took everything I had to pry the first latch loose, then the second. The third resisted until it snapped, spraying splinters across my arm. Inside was not what I expected. No weapons, no drugs, no money, just life frozen in pieces. A small hospital bracelet, my last name printed on the tag, but the first name wasn't mine. Next to it, a faded Polaroid of a newborn wrapped in what looked like a motel towel. The flash glare had bleached the face white, but the outline of the tiny hand was unmistakable. Beneath the photo lay a cheap black USB drive, taped to the lid, and a brass storage key stamped with the words, Unit B-17. The metal was cold as ice. And at the very bottom, sealed in plastic, a note scrawled in thick marker. If you're reading this, run. For a few seconds, the world just stopped. The river noise vanished. The wind died. It was like everything around me was waiting to see what I'd do next. My first instinct was to laugh. It felt absurd, like a bad movie plot. My second was to throw the box back into the water and pretend none of it existed. But then I looked again at the hospital bracelet, the name half smudged, and a horrible thought crawled up my spine. What if the baby in the picture was me? I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the USB. My flashlight beam caught something else, a line of footprints in the mud leading straight toward me. Fresh, still filling with water. My parents' truck had turned around. The glow of headlights cut through the trees, bouncing off the wet leaves like lightning. I dropped to my knees, shoving the items back into the box, but it was too late. The engine idled above the bank. Doors opened. I could hear my mother's voice, soft, almost pleading, carried on the wind. "Are you sure?" she said. My father's reply was flat. "If he saw, we don't have a choice." My pulse pounded so hard I could hear it in my teeth. I grabbed the box and started to run along the riverbank, branches whipping my face, mud slipping under my feet. The flashlight's beam danced wildly, catching glimpses of the bridge rails above. Then came the sound that froze me mid-step, a flashlight clicking on behind me. I turned, the beam locked onto my chest like a spotlight. My mother stood there, soaked from the knees down, her face pale but calm. My dad stood behind her, his expression unreadable, rain dripping from his chin. "Put it down," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even scared. It was relieved, like something she'd been waiting for had finally happened. "You weren't supposed to find it this way." I clutched the box tighter, my arms trembling. "What is this?" "What's in here?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Whose name is that?" She took a step forward, the flashlight steady in her hand. "Please, honey," she said. "It's time you knew." The way she said time made something twist in my stomach. The beam caught the hospital bracelet still looped around my wrist. My father's face went ghost white. "You opened it," he said under his breath. Then louder, to her, "He opened it." I took another step back toward the water. "Tell me what's going on." The silence that followed felt like 1,000 years. Then my mom whispered one word, so soft I almost didn't hear it over the current. "Finally." That was when I realized this wasn't a secret they were afraid of losing. It was a secret they'd been waiting for me to find. And somewhere under that black water, something I didn't understand yet had started to move. Morning light crept through the blinds like an accusation. Every slant of gold dust across the kitchen felt too bright, too clean, for what was sitting in front of me. The same wooden box I'd dragged from the river just hours ago. My clothes were still damp, my heartbeat still uneven. The smell of mud and fear clung to everything. I sat there staring at the cheap black USB drive taped to the lid, its plastic cracked at the corner, as if it had fought hard not to be buried. I hesitated before plugging it into my laptop. Part of me wanted to throw it straight into the garbage disposal, grind it into silence. But the other part, the louder one, wanted answers. The computer chimed and a folder popped open on the screen. The title made my skin prickle. River, NDAs, payments, video. I clicked the first file. It was labeled 1999 CAM 001. A grainy video began playing, handheld, shaky, recorded in a cheap motel bathroom. My parents were there, 15 years younger, their faces pale under flickering fluorescent light. My father held something wrapped in a blanket. My mother's voice trembled. "We didn't kidnap him. We rescued him." My father shook his head, whispering, "Then we hide what they did." "We hide him." I froze. The baby's muffled cry bled through the speaker. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it wasn't me. Maybe they were talking about someone else's child. But the blanket, it was blue, the same shade as the one in my old baby pictures. My throat tightened. My mother on screen looked terrified, like someone who had just crossed a line she could never return from. When the video ended, I just sat there, staring at the paused frame of her face frozen in guilt. I clicked the next file, a spreadsheet. It wasn't just numbers. It was a trail. 10 wire deposits from a shell company registered in Delaware. The amounts were large, evenly spaced, and labeled as consulting. Each deposit led to the same recipient, my father's name. The company name at the top made my blood run cold. Riverbend Development Trust. I'd seen that name before. On the HOA newsletter, on the welcome sign at the neighborhood park. Our homeowners association president, Mr. Turner, was listed as the company's managing partner. I scrolled further down. The document title read, Private Placement Fees. Under it, dozens of names. Families from our own street. Neighbors who smiled at me, lent us sugar, hosted BBQs. Next to each name, a dollar amount. Beside that, an abbreviation, PPFINF. I didn't understand what it meant, but whatever this was, it wasn't legal. My parents weren't just hiding something, they were part of something. I leaned back in my chair, my palms slick with sweat. The hospital bracelet from the box lay beside the laptop. The tag was faded, but clear enough to read again. The last name was ours. The first name wasn't. Ethan. My heart skipped. My name is Jordan. Who the hell was Ethan? I picked up the USB again. There was one more file labeled Map. When I opened it, a single screenshot appeared. A red pin dropped on a desolate industrial area outside town near I-84. Under the pin, faint letters read, Storage Lot, Unit B17. My eyes flicked to the brass key still lying on the table, stamped with the same code. It wasn't just random junk. They'd meant for that box to be found one day. Or maybe they'd meant to make sure it never was. As I stared at the map, my phone buzzed beside me. The Life 360 app lit up, Dad's truck icon moving on the screen. He was driving toward the river again. The same river where I'd caught them last night. My stomach twisted. Why was he going back there? To retrieve what I'd taken? To erase evidence I didn't even understand yet? Before I could think further, another vibration. A text from an unknown number. No name. Just a single image attached. I tapped it open and froze. It was a photo of me standing at the riverbank holding the box, time-stamped 3:03 a.m., the same moment I thought I was alone. Someone had been watching me. The next message arrived before I could react. Bring the key. Another followed instantly. Come alone. A final line blinked on the screen, each word heavier than the last. Or we open Unit B17 without you. I felt the world tilt slightly, as if gravity had shifted just for me. My hands trembled as I stared at the message, rereading it over and over, trying to make sense of how anyone could know what I'd found, what I'd seen. The only people who could possibly know were the two who had buried the truth in the first place, my parents. But this wasn't their style. My mom didn't send anonymous threats. My dad didn't talk in ultimatums. I checked the message details. No contact name. No traceable number. Just unknown. My brain raced through possibilities. Could someone else have been there that night? A third person by the river recording from the dark? My breath hitched as I remembered the faint click I'd heard while climbing down the embankment. I thought it had been a branch snapping, but maybe it was a camera. I replayed the motel video again, slower this time. Something I'd missed before became clear in the corner of the frame, a reflection in the bathroom mirror. Not just my parents. A third figure. Someone holding the camera, wearing a priest collar. My father looked directly at him near the end and whispered, "If this ever surfaces, we're all dead." That line echoed through my head as I looked again at the text. Whoever had sent it, they had access to everything. My parents' secrets, my location, maybe even this very moment. I reached up and unplugged the USB. My laptop screen flickered once, then went black. Static. I yanked the power cord. The smell of burning plastic filled the room. I turned off my phone, heart pounding, and stared out the window toward the end of the street. The sky had turned a muted gray. Somewhere beyond that horizon was a storage lot off I-84, Unit B-17, waiting for me. Whatever was inside it had been hidden for 24 years. And now, someone wanted me to unlock it. As the morning silence pressed in around me, one truth became painfully clear. The wooden box wasn't the secret. It was the invitation. Rain hammered the windshield as I pulled off I-84, wipers slapping like a metronome for panic. The GPS voice guided me down a deserted frontage road toward a fenced storage facility sitting under flickering sodium lamps. Everything about it looked wrong. The half-collapsed sign, the motionless cameras, the rows of orange roll-up doors that disappeared into shadow. I parked beneath one of the lights, the brass key from the river box heavy in my pocket. The air smelled of wet metal and dust. I told myself I was here for answers, but really, I was here because not knowing was starting to feel worse than dying. The rain softened as I stepped out, shoes sinking into puddles that mirrored the dull orange glow. Every step echoed too loud, too lonely. I passed doors marked with peeling numbers until I reached the one, B-17. The lock was old but solid, a round cylinder designed to keep out everyone except whoever had the key I was holding. My fingers shook as I slid it in. The tumblers clicked like bones. When I lifted the roll-up door, it groaned in protest, a long metallic scream that seemed to wake something sleeping in the concrete. Inside was not emptiness. It was a crime scene disguised as storage. A baby car seat sat in the center of the floor, its fabric molded with age, a small pink blanket still tucked inside as if someone had meant to come back. Beside it stood another wooden box, this one newer, smoother, its corners reinforced with steel brackets. A binder lay open on top, pages warped by humidity, and next to that, a stack of passports bound with a rubber band. I knelt and flipped the binder open. The first page nearly stopped my heart, non-disclosure agreement. The first signature line read Richard Turner, the HOA president. The next, Judge Alan Merritt, the same name I'd seen stamped on envelopes that came to our mailbox marked official correspondence. The third signature froze me entirely. Reverend James Lowe, the so-called Bible man who prayed over potlucks at every neighborhood block party. My mother always said he kept the community moral. Each section of the binder had more signatures. Neighbors I knew. Their addresses, the same seal embossed at the bottom. Riverbend Development Trust. The same organization from the spreadsheet on the USB. The NDAs listed minor placement coordination, confidential identity restructuring, and family relocation subsidy. Legal. Jargon wrapped around something human and ugly. Beneath that, a line that made my blood run cold. Participant B-17, custodial minor, Jordan, redacted. I turned to the second box, the one sealed tighter. My pulse pounded as I lifted the lid. Inside were neat bundles of cash, the paper yellowed at the edges but unmistakably real. On top lay a baby pacifier turned amber with age and a Polaroid. The flash had overexposed half the frame, but I could still make out the image. 2 infants in a hospital bassinet, swaddled side by side. Someone had scrawled one word on the back in black marker, Jordan, with an arrow pointing to the other baby. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My name, but the arrow wasn't toward me. It was pointing away. My mind spun. The bracelet from the river box had the wrong first name. Now this photo said I was the wrong baby. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, only that my entire life had been built on a lie someone went to extraordinary lengths to hide. I dropped the Polaroid back into the box and sat hard on the cold concrete, rainwater dripping from the doorframe onto my neck. My phone vibrated against my thigh, breaking the silence. A calendar alert blinked on the screen, one I hadn't created. Sealed hearing, 10 gowns a.m., family court. The location was downtown. My name was on the invite, but with a middle initial I'd never used before, Jordan E. Mercer. My full legal name had never included an E. I stared at it, heart thudding. Who the hell was Jordan E. Mercer? Before I could think, the overhead light flickered twice and went out, plunging the unit into near darkness. I reached for my phone flashlight, the beam shaky as it cut through the damp air. Then came the sound of metal clanging from the far end of the corridor, 2 doors banging open in unison. I froze. Muffled voices carried through the echoing hall, too distorted to make out at first. Then, check every unit on this row. Boots on concrete. Getting closer. I shoved the binder and photo back into the box, scanning for another exit, but there wasn't one. The light from a flashlight sliced through the darkness, sweeping across the hallway. 2 silhouettes appeared, men in dark suits soaked from the rain. One held a clipboard sealed in plastic. The other's hand rested on a holstered stun gun. Their footsteps were calm, methodical. Not thieves. Not random strangers. The first man stopped at my door and aimed the light straight into my face. "Step away from the evidence," he said, voice smooth and bureaucratic. The words sounded rehearsed, like they'd said them 100 times before. "This property is under court jurisdiction." My throat went dry. "Who are you?" I demanded. The man with the clipboard didn't answer. He flipped a page and read aloud, "Subject, Jordan E. Mercer. Classification, recovered property." His eyes flicked up to mine. "That would be you." The air left my lungs. "Recovered property?" I said, incredulous. "I'm not property." The second man raised the stun gun slightly, his tone polite but final. "Sir, please cooperate. The court doesn't want another incident." Another incident? My mind reeled. How many of these recoveries had there been? I backed up until my shoulders hit the cold metal wall of the unit. The rain outside was deafening now, pounding the roof like gunfire. "Where are my parents?" I asked, voice shaking. "What did you do to them?" The man with the clipboard met my eyes for the first time. "They've been served," he said. "They'll meet you in court." He turned the clipboard around, the paper gleaming in my flashlight beam. At the top was an official seal, subpoena. My parents' names were listed as co-respondents. Underneath, my classification, recovered property. Case file B17. Something inside me broke then. I realized the truth wasn't just buried in that box, it was weaponized. This entire town, this entire network, had been built on a trade. Babies for money, identities for favors, lives for silence. And I was one of them. The man reached for the box, but I slammed it shut and held it tight against my chest. "If I'm property," I said, "then you're trespassing." His jaw tightened. "That's not how this works." But I was already running. The rain swallowed their shouts as I sprinted out into the storm, clutching the binder and the Polaroid like proof that I was real. Behind me, the echo of metal doors slamming rolled through the corridor like thunder. Somewhere in the chaos, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever I was to them, I was done being it. The courthouse smelled like rain and coffee that had been burning since dawn. Every surface gleamed too clean, too sterile, like it was trying to scrub out the rot underneath. My parents sat beside me at the defense table, Mom pale, Dad rigid, his jaw locked like a vice. Around us, the gallery whispered in waves, neighbors, teachers, and people who used to wave when I mowed the lawn. Their faces flickered between curiosity and pity. A few looked away, ashamed they'd come to watch. The judge entered, robes sweeping like a curtain, and my stomach turned to ice. It was him, the same man whose signature I'd seen in the binder from the storage unit. Judge Alan Merritt, the man who had helped write the NDAs that sold children like me. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and called the hearing to order. The name at the top of the docket stung: State vs. Richard and Elaine Mercer, and under it, in smaller letters, Custodial Minor, Jordan E. Mercer. I didn't understand half of it, only that my life was suddenly a case file. The prosecutor stood. His suit was perfect, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Your Honor," he began, "this case concerns an illegal placement operation masked as a community charity. The defendants, Richard and Elaine Mercer, knowingly accepted payment in exchange for concealing the identity of a child, one of several trafficked through Riverbend Development Trust." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. My father's knuckles went white on the table. My mother's breathing quickened. The prosecutor turned toward me, his gaze cold but almost pitying. "That child," he said, "was their son. You were the charity." The words hit harder than any punch. The room blurred. My chest felt hollow. I wasn't sure which hurt more, being sold or being told it out loud. Before I could process it, the heavy oak doors at the back slammed open. Heads turned. A man strode in, dripping rainwater onto the floor, a flash drive in one hand, Bible tucked under his arm. Reverend James Lowe, the so-called Bible man who led Sunday prayers at every block barbecue, smiled like this was his sermon. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "the defense would like to submit supplemental evidence." He set a cardboard box full of hard drives on the clerk's desk. "This includes footage obtained from the night of the river." Judge Merritt stiffened. "Mr. Lowe, these proceedings are sealed. How did you—" "By divine intervention, I suppose," Lowe interrupted, his grin widening. He looked at me for a second too long. I saw something behind the smile then. Recognition. Ownership. The bailiff plugged one of the drives into a monitor. Static filled the courtroom. Then a video played. The footage was old, grainy, the angle shaky like someone was hiding behind trees. The scene came into focus. A moonlit riverbank, the same one from the bridge. 3 men digging near the bend. My stomach dropped as faces emerged in the light. The first was Judge Merritt. The second, HOA President Richard Turner. The third was Lowe himself, younger but unmistakable. They were hauling a tarp from the hole, something small inside. Merritt whispered, "It's done?" Lowe nodded. Then the pastor's voice, steady, chilling. "We can't risk the twin." Gasps erupted in the courtroom. The judge slammed his gavel, voice shaking. "Recess!" he barked. "Counsel my chambers! Now!" The screen went black. My father leaned close, whispering so quietly I could barely hear him over the chaos. "They'll bury this again," he said. "They always do." Mom's hand clutched mine. Her eyes shimmered, not with fear but exhaustion. "Whatever happens," she said, "we keep you." "Keep me?" I echoed. The words didn't feel real. "Like property?" Her lip trembled. "No, sweetheart. Like family, even if it started wrong." The bailiff announced a 15-minute recess. The audience buzzed like flies over a carcass. I turned to my parents. "Tell me everything," I said. "Now." Mom looked at Dad, then back at me. "We didn't dump that box to hide it," she whispered. "We dumped it because someone kept fishing out our past." My pulse raced. "Who?" Her answer came like a confession dragged from her soul. "Your biological father," she said softly. "He runs this town." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but she didn't blink. My father's face had gone chalk white. "He was part of the original network," he said. "They called it Riverbend Placement. The church ran it. Families paid for babies under the table. We found out too late." "Too late for what?" I asked. "For you," Mom said. Her voice cracked. "He sold you twice. Once to the trust, and once to us. We thought we were saving you." The hallway clock ticked. Somewhere down the corridor, a printer hummed to life. My heartbeat drowned everything else. My biological father. The network. The money. It was all tangled together like vines strangling the truth. Before I could ask another question, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it until I saw the notification. It was a push alert. From a local live stream. Riverbend Church, baptisms at dusk. Join us at the bend. The thumbnail froze my blood. The image was the exact spot from the video, the moonlit bend where they'd buried whatever was under that tarp. The timestamp read 6:42 p.m. Tonight. I looked up, my voice barely a whisper. He's not hiding anymore. Dad's eyes followed the screen. He's daring you to come, he said, and I knew he was right. Whoever my biological father was, he wasn't afraid of exposure. He wanted me to see what he'd built, the church, the town, the illusion of purity. The same place that had erased who I was. The bailiff called us back inside. The judge returned, red-faced, refusing to meet my eyes. But I barely heard his words. My mind was already at the river, picturing the water turning gold at sunset. The crowd singing hymns as secrets slept beneath their feet. Mom's hand tightened around mine one last time. If you go there, she said, you'll find him. But if you do, you won't come back the same. The judge banged his gavel again. This hearing is postponed until further notice, he declared, voice trembling. All parties are under gag order. As people began filing out, I stood in the aisle staring at the crucifix hanging above the bench. For the first time, it didn't look like salvation. It looked like ownership. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The rain had stopped, but the streets glistened like glass. I pulled the brass key from my pocket, its engraving still faintly visible. B17, a number, a label, maybe the last piece of my stolen identity. When I stepped into the stormlight, one thought burned through the noise. Tonight, the river bends back. The sky bled orange as the sun began to sink behind the cottonwoods, turning the river to liquid copper. The hymn of the church crowd rolled like smoke through the humid air, a soft chorus that didn't belong to this place or these people. They sang of purity, of rebirth, of water that washed away sin. But I knew what this river really washed away: names, lives, truths. I parked on the edge of the field where the church had set up their folding chairs and cameras. The banner above the stage read, Riverbend Church, baptisms at dusk. Underneath, Pastor Lowe stood knee-deep in the shallows, white robes glowing in the sunset, arms open like a prophet. Behind him, the judge and the HOA president stood watching, pretending to be holy men instead of businessmen with skeletons in the mud. I could feel eyes following me as I walked down the slope toward the bend. My GoPro pressed cold against my chest, the USB drive heavy in my pocket. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but the need for truth drowned out fear. I wasn't here for revenge anymore. I was here to return what the river had taken. As the choir's voices rose, I slipped beneath the bridge and crouched by the stone pillar where I'd hidden a small battery projector earlier. It was old, cheap, but good enough for what I needed. I waited until Lowe's voice echoed over the water, smooth as oil. Brothers and sisters, we cleanse the soul tonight, he said, hands raised to the heavens. We are reborn in truth. Then let's start with yours, I whispered. I plugged in the USB. The projector whirred to life, spilling pale light across the sandstone wall of the bridge. The singing faltered as a shaky video appeared, grainy night footage, the one from the hard drive. The riverbank came into view, and 3 figures began digging in the moonlight: the judge, the HOA president, and Lowe himself, years younger. The crowd gasped. Lowe froze mid-sermon. On screen, he whispered the words that would end him. We can't risk the twin. Screams erupted. Phones lifted. Someone shouted, "That's the pastor!" And chaos rippled through the congregation like fire through dry grass. Lowe spun toward the screen, his voice cracking. Turn that off. It's doctored, lies. But the truth was already flooding across the bridge wall 40 feet wide. Sirens wailed in the distance. Sheriff's deputies moved in from both ends of the park, lights flashing. The judge pointed at me, his face red and shaking. That USB is stolen property, he yelled. I stepped out from under the bridge and waded into the shallows, water swirling around my legs. My voice carried over the stunned murmurs. You mean recovered property? I called out. Property you paid my parents to bury? Gasps scattered through the crowd. Then a voice behind me, trembling but strong. He's right. I turned. Mom and Dad were walking down the slope hand in hand. They looked smaller than I'd ever seen them, tired, soaked, but unafraid. Deputies moved to stop them, but Mom raised her hands. Arrest us if you have to, she said. But let him play the last file. I nodded and tapped the final folder on the USB. Truth. Final. The image flickered, then steadied. Motel wallpaper. A young woman sobbing into the camera, her hair clinging to her wet cheeks. Her eyes, my eyes, stared straight through the screen. She cradled 2 newborns in her arms. I can't protect both, she whispered. They're taking one for money and one for power. If you're seeing this, Jordan, you're the one they priced higher. The crowd went silent. The sound of the river filled the space between every heartbeat. Then another clip autoplayed, one I hadn't seen before. My parents, years younger, standing at this same bend, moonlight shimmering on the water. They weren't burying a body. They were burying a small wooden box. My father whispered, "The name's inside. It dies here tonight." The camera zoomed close enough to see it. A keepsake box carved with letters, my original name. They had erased it to save me from the system that bought and sold children like property. The truth hit me like lightning. My whole life I'd hated them for what they buried. But now I understood. They hadn't buried guilt. They'd buried me to set me free. The scene around us fractured. Some church members cried, others ran. Deputies cuffed the judge as he screamed about fabrications. The HOA president bolted into the trees. Pastor Lowe dropped his Bible in the river, its pages spreading like drowning wings. Mom turned to me, eyes glistening. "We'll take whatever sentence comes," she said quietly. "We did the wrong thing to stop a worse thing. We won't ask you to forgive us." Dad reached into his coat and handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a deed to a small house, a college fund statement, and a handwritten confession addressed to the Attorney General, already mailed. "This was always for you," he said, "and for the one we couldn't keep." I looked out at the water swallowing the light, the bend that had been the graveyard of our past. My whole town, their fake smiles, their silent deals, was built on this river's silence. Tonight, I was breaking that silence forever. I clicked the final file on the USB, recovered, twin, live. The projector hummed, and a live hospital feed appeared. A sterile room. A nurse wheeled in a young man, my face, my age, my mirror. A caption blinked on the screen. Protective custody lifted. Release authorized. Today. The projector sputtered and went dark. The river kept moving. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A voice that sounded exactly like mine said, "Are you the one who kept the name? Because I think I'm the one who kept the price." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The world spun, the crowd, the sirens, the cold water around my knees. I wasn't sure if I was shaking from fear or awe. I looked at my parents, the deputies, the river that had hidden my identity all these years. Everything felt both ruined and reborn. When I finally found my voice, I didn't forgive anyone. Not yet. Forgiveness was too easy for a town that built its faith on lies. Instead, I did something worse, for them, and better for the truth. I opened my phone, hit Go Live, and turned the camera toward the chaos. "America," I said, my voice steady over the rising sirens. "This is what Riverbend baptizes, because what they hid in that box wasn't a body. It was identity. And tonight, for the first time, the river gave it back."